if he figured it was all right to take initiation, even if he weren't serious, he would try it. So just see the risk that Prabhupada was taking. In the Vedic culture, then particularly those from India, they understand that taking initiation is a serious thing. Taking a spiritual master, it's not something that you like join a club and then you think, I'll pack this club in and I'll go and join another club. It's not a hobby. It's a lifetime's commitment. And Krishna will hold us to that promise. Some of the devotees didn't understand it, but you see, Prabhupada was so merciful that he knew that they didn't understand it, but still he was offering it. He was prepared to take their karma just so that he could try to spread Lord Chaitanya's message in the West. James Green thought he wasn't pure enough to be initiated. Who am I to be initiated? But Swami had asked him to bring something over to the storefront. I came and it was just understood that I was supposed to be initiated, so I thought, why not? Stanley was sticking with the Swami and his follows. He asked his mother if he could be initiated, and she said it would be all right. Steve wanted more time to think about it. Keith was in the hospital. Bruce had only been attending for a week or two, and it was too soon. Chuck was on a week's vacation from the regulated spiritual life at the temple, so he didn't know about the initiation. So it sounded like he blooped for the week. That was put politely. No one was asked to shave their head or even cut hair or change dress. No one offered Swamiji the traditional Guru Dakshina, the donation a disciple is supposed to offer as a gesture of his great obligation to his spiritual master. Hardly anyone even relieved him of his chores, so Swamiji himself had to do most of the cooking and other preparations for the initiation. He was perfectly aware of the mentality of his boys, and he didn't try to force anything on anyone. Some of the initiates didn't know until after the initiation, when they had inquired that the 4 rules, no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, were mandatory for all disciples. Swamiji's reply was then, I'm very glad that you're finally asking me that. It was to be a live Vedic sacrifice with a ceremonial fire right there in the front room of Swamiji's apartment. In the center of the room was a sacrificial arena, a platform of bricks, 4 inches high, 2 feet square, and covered with a mound of dirt. The dirt was from the courtyard, and the bricks were from a nearby gutted building. Around the mound were 11 bananas, clarified butter, sesame seeds, whole barley grains, 5 colors of powdered dyes, and a supply of kindling. The 11 initiates took up most of the remaining space in the front room as they sat on the floor, knee to knee, around the sacrificial arena. The guests in the hallway peered curiously through the open door. For everyone except the Swami, this was all new and strange, and every step of the ceremony took place under his direction. When some of the boys had made a mess of trying to apply Vaishnav tilak to their foreheads, Swamiji had patiently guided his finger up the foreheads, making a neat, narrow V. Srila Prabhupada ki. So we can see there that the devotees didn't have a clue what was going on. And I think recently someone was sharing with us that when it came time to do the offering, usually they have, I think it was Janananda Maharaj who gave initiations last Sunday here, and he was talking about how in the first initiations, usually you offer grains into the fire, and then at the end you offer the banana. But when the devotees peeled the banana, and did they start eating it or something? So they just totally didn't have a clue to the nth degree. But Prabhupada very patiently just guided them through everything, and somehow or another established a worldwide movement. This is the power of a great Vaishnava. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Reading from Sri Caitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, Chapter 19, entitled The Lord Instructs Srila Rupa Goswami. And we're starting from text 115, is it? Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, Rasa Tattva, Pranta. Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, Rasa Tattva, Pranta. Sabha Shakaila, Prabhu Bhagavata, Siddhanta, Sabha Shikaila, Prabhu Bhagavata, Siddhanta, Bhagavat Pradhan. Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, Rasa Tattva, Pranta, Sabha Shikaila, Prabhu Bhagavat, Siddhanta, Pranta, Sabha Shikaila, Prabhu Bhagavat, Siddhanta, Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, Rasa Tattva, Pranta, Sabha Shikaila, Prabhu Bhagavat, Siddhanta. Please chant. Ladies.
Krishna Tattva Bhakti Tattva Rasa Tattva Prana
So actually, it's text 117. We're going to give a class from, but anyway, we'll just read through that. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught Srila Rupa Goswami the ultimate limit of the truth about Lord Krishna, the truth about devotional service, and the truth about transcendental mellows, culminating in conjugal love between Radha and Krishna. Finally, he told Rupa Goswami about the ultimate conclusions of Srimad Bhagavatam. Ramananda Pashayata Siddhanta Sunila Rupe Kripa Karita Sabasancharila. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught Rupa Goswami all the conclusions he had heard from Ramananda Roy and duly empowered him so that he could understand them. Shripa Hridaye Prabhu Shakti Sancharila Sarvatadva Nirupani Pravina Karila. By entering the heart of Rupa Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu empowered him to ascertain properly the conclusions of all truths. He made him an experienced devotee whose decisions correctly agreed with the verdicts of the disciplic succession. Thus, Sri Rupa Goswami was personally empowered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki. The principles of devotional service are only apparently under the jurisdiction of material activity. To be rightly guided, one must be personally guided by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This was the case with Srila Rupa Goswami, Sanat Goswami, and other acharyas. Om Agana Tamarandasya Gananjana Slakaya Chakshunmatam Yana Tasmashi Hruve Namaha Mukam Kuroti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Grim Yatkripatam Maham Vande Shikurim Jinitaranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. By entering the heart of Rupa Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu empowered him to ascertain properly the conclusions of all truths. He made him an experienced devotee whose decisions correctly agreed with the verdicts of the disciplic succession. Thus, Sri Rupa Goswami was personally empowered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, nowadays, people are quite accustomed to eclectic spiritualism. Take a little from this and a little from that. And to some degree, this is what Rupa Goswami did also. But the basis of his eclecticism was under the direction of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that he took the essence. Could we put a light on, please? Because it's just a wee bit overcast today. Thanks. So sometimes devotional service and material activity in all sorts of spheres looks like the same thing, but it's not. So say, for example, someone may be eclectic. They think, well, I'll try a little bit of this from Buddhism, a little bit of that from Islam, a little bit of that from American Indians, a little bit of this from some obscure tribe in Papua New Guinea, and they'll try a little bit of some rings around my neck from Africa. And so they try all sorts of things, and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But what is the basis? It's all speculation. It's just whatever feels good at the time. And really, what is it doing? So we have to be careful what we're doing that's simply not blowing on the boil. If we have a boil and you go to the doctors, nowadays you have to wait 6 months for to see a doctor if you're lucky. So after 6 months, the boil's throbbing like anything. And you go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, that looks quite sore. Let's have a look at that. And he just goes, is that better now? You go, what? The Chinese doctor, she knows. You don't blow on boils, do you? So you wouldn't be very happy with that. You think, could I see a real doctor, please? Where's your qualifications? Where did you get that piece of paper on the wall? And you say, no, that's fine. That's how everybody does it nowadays. We just do our own thing, or you put a little bit of tea tree oil in it, or something like that. So you'd think, okay, well, let me try to find some relief somewhere else. So if our spiritual eclectic gathering of so-called spiritual knowledge is not actually abating our material disease, if our the lower qualities of life, such as lust, anger, and greed, are not abating, then we can understand that our eclecticism is actually not effective. It's simply blowing on the boil. So no offense against anyone who's trying, but sometimes we go to these wellness festivals, and most of it what's going on is simply blowing on the boil. And everybody's looking for some relief in this material world, but sometimes they accept something prematurely. But the only thing which is really going to satisfy is when we can find a higher engagement. So sometimes, as we're saying, it looks like the devotees are just doing the same as everybody else. They wear clothes, maybe a little bit exotic for some people, and then other people wear exotic clothes as well. So they think, oh, well, these guys wear exotic clothes, we wear exotic clothes, we're all similar. And then they find out, well, these guys are really, really strict. Didn't expect that. I thought they'd be doing some of the crazy stuff that I do. But then they find out, no, these devotees are devotees are a very, very strange mix. It's like they look like they can be super magnanimous. Lord Chaitanya's Mahavadanya Avatar, the most merciful incarnation. He can be super liberal, but at the same time they're super conservative. And sometimes this is even a problem for devotees to agree. But but this is the nature. I remember Indra Swami once saying that a devotee should be liberal with everyone else and strict with himself. So it's not that we're strict with everyone else and liberal with ourselves. Sometimes people are like that because they actually are not dealing with their own situations. But the main thing is we should be taking care of our own situation because it's about self-realization. It's not everybody else realization. We can, because Kali Dosha Nidhi Rajan, Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults. So it's not difficult to find faults with people. Sometimes we think we're very intelligent because we can see the faults in people. And I remember one devotee was misguided into thinking that she was the most advanced person in the place because she could see everyone else's faults. And I says, well, surely the most advanced person is the person who doesn't see any faults, they see only the good. So she had a little bit of rethinking of her program. And it's material intelligence sometimes means we can see all these things. And what does that mean? It means that we have an idea of perfection. We have an idea of beauty. Intrinsically, we have that there because that is there within the soul's nature. We know what beauty looks like. We know what perfection is, but we're not finding it in the material world. But here, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is inquiring from Ramananda Roy. We see in the picture here, Sri Krishna Caitanya, Radha Krishna Nahi Anya. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that verse is quoted as a caption attributed to this picture. So Ramananda Roy in the Guru Ganadesha Dipika, which is a little Shastra, the Dipika or the lamp which illuminates the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, who they were in Krishna Lila. So does anybody remember what it says in the Guru Ganadesha Dipika, who Ramananda Roy is in Krishna Lila? Yes, top of the class. He was Arjuna. And there are other Pandavas are also in Chaitanya Lila, like Gopinath Patanayaka. We're devotees of Radha and Krishna. Sometimes the devotees are put into difficulty to glorify them. Just like Prabhupada, he didn't just walk over and everybody came, waiting on him. 10,000 disciples were standing there at Boston Harbor. He underwent so much difficulty. And this difficulty is Krishna's way of glorifying his devotee, that he'll go through anything for the pleasure of the Lord. So this devotee, Murari Gupta, associate of Lord Chaitanya, he was asked to give up the worship of Lord Ram and take to the worship of Radha and Krishna. So he was trying to do this, but he was very disturbed. And he went to Lord Chaitanya, says, I just can't give up the worship of Lord Ram. And he said in front of all the devotees, he said, this is because you're Hanuman. So this is his swarup. Hanuman is always the devotee of Lord Ram. So when the Lord takes his appearance, then his devotees come with him from the different leelas, and they take part in different, like, for example, there was one devotee, Kulavecha Sridhar. He was such a simple, pure-hearted devotee. He lived by the banks of the Ganges, and he simply made his living by selling bananas and banana leaves. And from that, you don't make a big living, even in those days. And he'd give half for the worship of the Lord for the temple. I can't remember if it was which temple, if it was Jagannath or whatever. Huh? For the worship of Ganges, that's right. So even that, he was made next to nothing, but still half he was giving. What an ideal householder, right? And it turns out he was also in the pastimes of Lord Krishna, he was Kusumasava, cowherd boy. So these devotees are naturally inclined towards serving the Lord with love and affection. And all these wonderful pastimes read about in Caitanya Charitamrita, Caitanya Bhagavat, Caitanya Mangal, etc. Then they're there to attract us to the wonderful exchanges between the Lord and his devotees. And that's something which is not just some historical thing that went on back 500 years ago, 5,000 years ago, but the Lord's saying, this is, his pastimes are here now in Kali Yuga. He's here now in Scotland. For years we were shouting Gauranga, and then he says, okay, what's all this Gauranga shouting? Let me come and see. So he came over. He's on Traveling Sanctum from Berkeley, California. He came over here, and hopefully he'll stay with us. So as long as we're continuing the Lord's mission, then the Lord will be enthused to stay here and inspire us. So here also we're seeing that this eclectic thing, which is nowadays very popular, there's different reasons for it. There's a couple that I'm aware of. If anyone else has got any other reasons, they could offer them. Sometimes people are eclectic because they have had some bad experience with religion, and they think, well, I'll decide, because the person who was telling me before, they were such a hypocrite, why should I take them as an authority? So therefore, I'll decide what's good for me, and I won't have somebody else tell me what to do. So you can see why people would come to that conclusion, because that is often the case. And sometimes the eclectic thing is there because they don't want to surrender. Just like there was, Prabhupada was on this train journey in India, and there was one Indian gentleman who had approached Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was speaking with him, giving him some instruction. He was telling him how one should find a bona fide spiritual master, a pure devotee, and surrender to that person. And this man said, but now it is very difficult to find a pure devotee. And Prabhupada says, so what is a pure devotee? Because Prabhupada knew that he was saying it with a motive that I can't find it, therefore I don't have to surrender. This is the idea. If I can't find it, then I can't be held responsible for not surrendering to pure devotee. I couldn't find any. So Prabhupada says, so what is a pure devotee? And then he couldn't answer. And he says, you cannot find pure devotee because you don't want to surrender. He says, but actually there are many pure devotees. So Prabhupada wasn't giving him an excuse. He was being very kind by basically removing his obstruction so that he could. He said, actually, there's many pure devotees on the planet at this moment. So, but if our inclination is we don't want to surrender, we want to just take a little bit of this and a little bit of that just to make life a little bit comfortable, then we will have to remain in the material world. That's the fact of the matter. So we have to step outside of our comfort zone a little bit. But the interesting thing is, it's only an illusion that we have a comfort zone, because whatever we find comfort in the material world, it can go at any moment. Even ourselves, we can go at any moment. We find comfort in this body, but then the body may let us down. We might get some terrible sickness, and the body is no longer a source of pleasure. It's a source of misery. Or the body may pack in altogether, and then we're evicted. We have to find another body to stay in. But the eclectic gatherings of writings of Rupa Goswami were based on the direct instruction of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu to write shastras to encourage people to surrender to Krishna. And he took the essences of all the Vedic literatures, and so yogi namapi sarvesham madgaten antaratmana shadavan bhajate yomam samiyukta tamomataha. And so Krishna describes so many different types of yogis and the perfections that they can achieve. And he said, and of all yogis, the one who is most intimately united with me through Bhakti Yoga, that is the highest of all, that type of yogi, because everything else is culminating in that. So the Ashtanga Yoga, Raj Yoga, so many different types of yoga, they're simply there for the purpose of bringing the mind and senses under control. But when we serve Krishna, Rishikena, Sevanam Bhakti Uchate, by engaging our senses in the service of Rishikesh, the master of the senses, then our senses become controlled. So therefore, sometimes it looks like we're doing ordinary activities. We're driving a car, we're living in a house, we're eating meals, we're singing and dancing, we're doing things like that. And someone thinks, well, I do some singing and dancing at the football matches. I drive a car to the beach. I drive a car to work. And devotees also drive a car to work. But what is the purpose of everything they do? That is the key. The purpose of everything they do is to relate it to Krishna. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he said that he only maintained his family because he's seen them as devotees of Krishna. So this is the same for any other householder attempting to be a devotee, is that we see them as devotees of Krishna. And we try to encourage them in Krishna consciousness. That is our purpose. And the devotees, they also have vehicles. What do they use them for? They use it for going on Harinam Sankirtan, for different programs. Whatever they're using it for is for the purpose of cultivating Krishna consciousness in their Prabhupada Desh, in the area which has been given to them by the Lord. So the writings of Rupa Goswami, that was his Prabhupada Desh. The Lord had given him, this is your area to work. And therefore we are known as Rupanugas, followers of Rupa Goswami. So everyone coming in the disciplic succession is following this Bhakti cult. It used to be that we were accused of being a cult. And in fact, we could say, yeah, we are a cult. If cult means culture or cultivate, then that's what it means. So if anyone ever asks you, you'd say, what do you mean by cult? And then, because then we could say, well, every religious organization's a cult then, isn't it? Just because you've got more numbers, that makes you not a cult. What is it? It's been cultivated. Yeah, we're cultivating this Bhakti Lata Bij, the seed of the creeper of devotional service. Brahmanda Brahmati Konya Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. So we've been wandering throughout the universe into many different species of life. Just like we were talking yesterday, 8,400,000 species of life. We've been in all of them probably many times. So long that it's considered Nitya Bada. This is also explained elsewhere in Caitanya Caritamrita, that the living entity in this material world is eternally conditioned. Nitya Bada. So that does mean to say that we will always have been conditioned. It means, Prabhupada, it means since time immemorial. It's so long we can't trace it. Just like sometimes devotees and other people, they go through some process of hypnosis, hypnotic regression. Like we have our friend Jayadev, he'll do that sometimes as a therapy. He'll do this life regressive therapy. He'll take you back to some trauma in your earlier life and he'll help you to overcome it. And if he doesn't find it there, he'll go back into a previous life or so many other previous life. But you couldn't say, okay, take me back to 8,400,000 lives ago. You wouldn't live long enough to be able to do that because you've got to go consecutively. Okay, go back. So we'd have to have a tape saying go back, and come back in about 5 years and say, okay, what one are you on now? Okay, I'll come back in a few more years' time. So it's not practical to trace it. Where did we come into this material world? So Prabhupada says, don't waste time trying to trace that. We know we're here. It's just like when you have a disease. Prabhupada gives an example. If you have a disease, then generally don't think, at which precise moment did I contract this disease? Before I go to get the treatment, let me first of all find out how I contracted the disease, where I got it from. I mean, regarding COVID, then probably you would, because people are trying to contain that type of thing. But generally we don't bother with that. It's like, say you've got some liver problem, then you think, okay, let me just try to trace it back. Perhaps it was like 7.23 years ago when I took that thing and it didn't agree with me. And then from then on, I've been eating this wrong thing. What does it matter? You go to the doctor and he says, this is wrong, this is a medicine. So just take it and get better and be normal again. So this is the NHA Aushadhi Maya Nasu Barulagi Hari Nama Mahamantra Lautumi Magi. That this Aushadhi medicine is the Mahamantra. We have forgotten Krishna. Forgotten Krishna, we fallen souls pay most heavily the illusion's tolls. Darkness around, all untrace. The only hope is divine grace. So the spiritual master, this is, that poem is, it's a couple of lines from Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja offering to his spiritual master. That when we're in the darkness and someone offers us light, we don't question it, we just take that helping hand. So this is back to that. So they're not necessarily looking for the truth. If you want to search till the day you die, why? What happens if you find it before you die? So we need to know what is the truth, and if we don't even know what the truth is, then somebody has to even tell us. Just like this is one of the important instructions that Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita, Tadvadi Pranipatena, Pariprishnena Sevaya Upadikshanti Te Gyanam Ganinas Tatvadarshanaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. A self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. So Krishna is telling us this is how we understand the truth, is by approaching a spiritual master. Well, then of course we could say, okay, well, that's fine. I could understand that perhaps somebody knows more than me and I can benefit by approaching someone else. But how do I know who to trust? So then what does Krishna say? Any instructions on that? That Krishna qualifies who is a bona fide spiritual master? Some of you must know because you've already accepted a spiritual master. Yeah. So how would you know if someone's just saying, "I have seen the truth, so I can tell you"? Then how would you know the person's seen the truth and that they're not just being phony? Guru Sadhu Shastra, yeah. So Krishna says, Evam Parampara Praptam. I'm sure you all knew that anyway. And so he's coming, first of all, he's coming disciplic succession. It's not self-appointed. If we go down to the Glebe Medical Centre in Lesmahago, and they say, well, you can wait to see a doctor in 6 months, or there's this guy who's called himself a doctor, and you can take your chances with him. Then you might go and see him, but then you think, he's got some like Mickey Mouse School of Medicine certificate on the wall, and he's sitting there and very dubious, and maybe he gets like he does some very kind of avant-garde way of inspecting you or something like that. You say, okay, I've got something wrong with my eye, and he's looking in your ear. Okay, I can see there's some wax in there. That's probably affecting your eyesight. You think, oh, this guy's crazy. So, of course, that's easy to understand. But in spiritual life also, we have to test, is the spiritual master, is what he's saying relevant to the material disease which I have? So this Nityabada thing, Prabhupada said, since time immemorial, it says it doesn't mean eternally. It says, but once one has the mercy of the spiritual master and one becomes enlightened as to what their real position is, that they're eternal servant of Krishna, they'll realize that they were never Nityabada. They were never conditioned, only temporarily covered. So eternity, it's not even such a long time because there's no start and there's no end to it. We can't measure it. But so millions of years in the material world is nothing in comparison to eternity. It's not even a blinking of an eye. It's almost just like a passing thought. So in eternity means that there was no beginning and there is no end. We can't conceive of that. And Prabhupada mentions also around the same passage that because we think in terms of today, yesterday, tomorrow, then we lose our sense of eternality. But when we become Krishna conscious, we realize that actually I was never Nityabada, I was never this body or all these millions of bodies. I was always a pure spirit soul. I just forgot. So the hope to get out of this darkness is the spiritual master. And here, the cyclic session, Krishna himself, in the form of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Caitanya, he's giving Rupa Goswami direct instructions to write books. And these books we have nowadays available here. We're reading them every day. We have them for distribution. We have them in our shops. So these books have been personally directed by Lord Chaitanya to Rupa Goswami, translated by Srila Prabhupada, and made available to the whole Western world, just like Nectar of Instruction, Upadeshamrita. This is basically taking us from, it's 11 instructions, and taking us from the point of being completely out of control senses to the point of pure love of God, the highest form of love of Godhead, in these 11 instructions. And what's the first one? Vacho vegam manasakroda vegam jiva vegam udara pasta vegam tan veganyo visheta dira shishastaham sadimam tvam prapanam. That what's the English for that? Anybody remember the English? Yeah, one who can control the urges of tongue, belly, genitals, the mind's demands, actions of anger, and the art. Yeah. So such a person is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So here we're being shown what is a bona fide spiritual master, one who is qualified, who controls the urges of the mind and the senses. And such a person is qualified. Hari Sariprabhu, who was Prabhupada's personal servant at one time, he used to visit Srinavar, and he once told us, asked him, so what did Prabhupada say was the qualifications for a spiritual master? And he said, actually, he asked the same question. Prabhupada says, very simple, the 4 regulative principles and 16 rounds. He says, if he can do this, he is guru. So this means obviously following to the proper degree. And this is also in line with what Lord Chaitanya says, that everyone become guru and try to liberate everyone in the land. So whether we are Shiksha Guru or Diksha Guru or Vartman Pradarshika Guru. So Shiksha Guru means instructing spiritual master, Diksha means initiating, sometimes they're one and the same. And Vartman Pradarshika Guru means to introduce people to Krishna consciousness. That could be, we could be that to so many people by going out there and giving Krishna consciousness to them, starting their spiritual life. And the better a devotee we can become, then the better help we can be to other people. Just like if someone is a good doctor, then they can be of more help to their patients. So this is our challenge, our personal responsibility for ourselves, and to try to serve the Lord's mission to the best degree. And Prabhupada, he didn't say, okay, you have to first of all become a perfect devotee before you can speak to anybody about Krishna. He says, just whatever you've learned in Krishna consciousness, just try to give that to others. So even if we've learned that prasadam is great, then we give that to others. Yeah, take this prasadam, it's fantastic. Oh, so it is. That's it, job done. And if we can give more, then we can give more. And then if not, then we direct them to other devotees. Like sometimes people ask you a question, you say, I don't know, but that devotee over there might know the answer. And people actually, they respect that more than just if we're pretending that we know everything. Yeah, so well, maybe this and that, and we just parrot fashion give out some irrelevant sloka. So when we're sharing our Krishna consciousness, the important thing is really to try to take an interest in the person, to find out something about them so that we know what to say that they can relate to. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Rupa Goswami, the whole Guru Parampara, they know the condition of the living entity in Kali Yuga, therefore they are providing us with the relevant instructions. So they're considering Desha Kalapatra. Now, if this was Satya Yuga, then perhaps the floodgates of mercy wouldn't be so widely open, but because if the Lord is not so merciful in Kali Yuga, then nobody is going to get liberated in this Kali Yuga. Nobody. But actually, in some of the Shastras, Kali Yuga, although it's the most degraded age, is glorified as being the best of all ages because it's the easiest way to actually go back to Godhead, simply by Harinam, Harinam, Harinam eva Kevalam, Kalonashcheva Nishcheva Gatiranyata. That is the most certain way of self-realization. So regardless of people's eclectic leanings, etc., then we don't judge them on that. We just think, well, that's okay. You like a bit of this and a bit of that. So take a bit of this Krishna consciousness. And we know that they'll be benefited. And it's not unheard of that people take to Krishna consciousness as just being maybe a part of a mix of things. And then eventually what happens is it just becomes the go-to thing. It's just like, personally speaking, I used to read so many different books. And when I read Bhagavad Gita, then somehow or another, then it just became like a yardstick where everything was being measured up against. I wasn't doing it in person. It's not like I had read it and think, okay, this is it. Now let's see what everything else says in relation to that. Because when you read something of the higher truth, like Prabhupada explains in Bhagavad Gita, that in the introduction he says that Bhagavad Gita contains many of the same truths you'll find in other scriptures, but also Bhagavad Gita contains truths you will not find in other scriptures. So therefore, when I found myself reading other literatures, then I could say, oh yeah, well that's in Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita says the same thing as this and that. But then I was seeing other things which I thought, well, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't make sense. Bhagavad Gita says this. So once you've been awakened to it, you don't even realize it yourself. Once you've been awakened, then you no longer can accept something which is not truth. And Krishna is very plain speaking in Bhagavad Gita. He's very clear and speaking, very definitive. He's basically telling us who we are, who he is, what our relationship is, what is this material world, and what our relationship with this material world is, and how to get out of it, how to live within this material world and not be entangled. So he's giving everything we need to know in that book. Therefore, we don't really necessarily find the need to look elsewhere. There was Jayadvaita Swami who was given a class once in Durban. It was very interesting. And there were some local churchgoers attended the class, and they were saying to him, well, you just quote from your Bhagavad Gita and your other scriptures, but you don't quote from this book or from that book. Why don't you quote from other books? And why are you so narrow-minded? And he says, no, he says, if I'm sitting down to a feast, we've got pakora and chutney, kheer, sweet rice, and samosas, apple chutney, and you come up to me and say, don't bother with the feast, here's an apple, then I'd say, well, no, I think you keep the apple. I've also got apple here in the chutney, and I've got this and I've got that, so you have the apple if that's what you want, but I'll just stick with the feast. and there's more here for you if you want it. No, I don't want the feast, I'll just keep the apple. So if you've already got more, or if the primary student goes up to the maths professor and he says, what's all this jumble up on the board here? You've got x plus y equals z, blah, 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 and pi equals 3.14, blah, blah, blah. What's all that? 1 and 1 is 2. Can't you just understand? It's as simple as that. What's all this jumble on the board? Then is the maths professor going to take this primary 1 student very seriously? I don't mean to be condescending, but the fact of the matter is that if you've got some higher truth already, we don't become proud of it. It's not like, we know more than you. No. It's not like that. We're not sticking our tongue and go, yeah, we've got the best. We're the king of the castle, you're the dirty wee rascal. But then a devotee feels compassion. It's like they don't realize that they have some knowledge, but they still are doing things which are going to cause them suffering. But we know that, and by Krishna's mercy, we've been enlightened to that, and we've been able to give up some of these things which they don't yet see, and they don't want to see. If someone's got their eyes tightly shut, pretending they're sleeping, then you can't wake them. If someone's actually sleeping, you can wake them. If they're just innocently sleeping, and then you wake them. But even if someone's pretending to sleep, and even if you throw a bucket of cold water on them, they still won't wake up. They'll be like that still, because if they don't want to wake up. So therefore, sometimes Prabhupada would be quite strong in use the word rascal. The absolute truth is there in front of them, but they don't want to accept. And this is unfortunately the case. But still, the devotee is kind. And even though Krishna says, in relation to that, was a verse that we shouldn't disturb. We shouldn't interfere with people. But then in purport, Prabhupada mentions that the devotee of the Lord is more merciful than the Lord because he knows the purpose of the Lord. So therefore, he will take all risks to preach Krishna consciousness. Does anybody remember the verse related to that?
Verse 27. The Buddhi Bedam Janayed.
Joshiyat Sevakarmani.
And so as not to disrupt the minds of those attached to the results of fruitive activities, one should not induce them to stop work. Rather, one should engage them in one should engage them for the gradual development of devotional service.
That's right. They should be engaged in the spirit of devotion. So this is the thing, is that the devotees have to refrain from being judgmental. The best thing, if you want to put someone off, is to be judgmental of them. Isn't it? If someone's judging you before you've even started, then you think, oh, well, they don't think very much of me, so I don't feel very inclined. And we were just speaking last week about Jayananda Prabhu, not Jayananda Prabhu here, but the Prabhupada disciple, that people would come along and he was accustomed to working with all sorts of kind of stray types of persons, and but he'd make them devotees. Even some of them became spiritual masters later, and somebody would be hammering a nail in, and he'd go, wow, I've never seen someone hammer a nail in so amazingly, so you're doing such a great job. He'd always encourage them, give them prasadam. So this is the thing, is of course it's not plastic. We're not just like, doing some superficial glorification, because you have to give people more credit. They've got more intelligence than that to be enamored by someone just giving you a big wow. You think, what's this guy wanting? People are very skeptical in this age. We have to be mindful of that people are very skeptical, especially when it comes to religion, so much so that practically you can't mention the word religion or God. So therefore we have to speak in different terms. And we see even Prabhupada did that in the Easy Journey to Other Planets. He talks about the antimaterial particle. Now he's talking about the spiritual aspect, the spirit soul. So we speak in language which is suitable for the persons to hear. If we just say, well, I'm just going to say this because that's what it is, and then we'll think, oh, it's not necessarily going to attract people. If our purpose is to take this message for their understanding. It was there in Prabhupada's prayer when he landed in America. How can I make this suitable for their understanding? So this is always the mood of the devotee when we're trying to give Krishna conscious people. Unless we know more about that person, how are we going to know whether what we're saying is suitable for their understanding? So this is one of the lessons here. So Rupa Goswami was personally guided by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, and the principle of Yukta Vairagya was strongly enunciated by Rupa Goswami. And this Yukta Vairagya means that in Kali Yuga we cannot ask everyone to move to the mountains and the forests and give up everything. That type of Vairagya, that type of renunciation. Raga means attachment, Vairagya means to renounce attachment. That type of renunciation is not possible. It's not practical. If everybody moves to the mountains, then they just become so populated that you'd be better going back to the city. That'd be even quieter. It'd be like a COVID lockdown city when there was nobody was there. It'd be quite peaceful to go to. So what type of Vairagya or renunciation is suitable in Kali Yuga is Yukta, which means to utilize everything in Krishna's service, to recognize that Bhoktaram Jagatabasam Sarvaloka Maheswaram Suridam Sarvabhutanam Gavamam Shantam Richati, that Krishna is the enjoyer of all sacrifices and the Lord of all spiritual material worlds, and he's the well-wishing friend of all living entities. So if people can understand that, then they can look upon Krishna as their eternal well-wisher, realize that nothing belongs to us, everything belongs to Krishna. We have it for a little while, and then when we go, we'll leave it behind. It was there before we came, it'll be there when we've gone. The material world just manifests in some way or another. Like sometimes it manifests in the form of a car, just like this morning I was driving my car up and I was thinking, I'm going to have to scrap this car sometime, who knows, this year, next year, 2 years or whatever. And then you become attached to it and you're thinking, but it's just some temporary manifestation of the material energy. A plastic dash, it's shaped like this, and then something shaped like that, and then your mind becomes attached to that. But it was, at one point, it never existed, and then sometime in the future, very near future, it won't exist, but somehow we become attached to that, and we pay the price for that attachment. But if we use it in Krishna's service, then we see it in relation to Krishna, then it becomes a source of purification, becomes a source of liberation, and no longer a source of attachment. Therefore, everything which is in our possession, the art of Yukta Vairagya, is to figure out and to find out how can we use this in Krishna's service. And therefore, not only is it not entangling us, but it frees us from entanglement. Of course, not everything can be used in Krishna's service. It's not like we can open up a slaughterhouse and call it, Krishna's slaughterhouse. We can't just do it like that. There's certain things we cannot do in Krishna's name. But there's so much we can do. Okay, we'll just stop there. Anyone get any questions or comments? Okay, Javat.
On that note, that we can't use everything in Krishna's service. There were a couple of, on several occasions, Srila Prabhupada said that, violence can also be used in Krishna's service to protect the devotees. Mm-hmm. And Srila Prabhupada at one point said that even like weapons can be used. But in a lecture I heard recently, he clarified that, and he said that it's not that the devotees will use weapons like in the sense of in aggression in the way that they're used in wars, but actually Krishna's Maya Shakti will use those weapons so that that Krishna doesn't directly get involved in like violent activities, but everything is going on under Krishna's sanction. So it's so in the sense that we can see everything in relation to Krishna, but that doesn't mean that that it's the best use of Krishna's energy, but because the living entities still have material desires, and then Krishna allows the Maya Devi to engage everything. And in that way we can understand that everything is actually, that Krishna is engaging everything ultimately.
Yes, and then therefore it's important that we understand padam padam yad vipadam, that if we want to stay in this material world, then there's danger at every step. Sometimes the material world seems nice, but then other times, even on the same planet, just now there's wars going on and we think, I wouldn't like to be there, and I pity those who are there. But if we stay in this material world, we'll be in that situation too. It's only a matter of time, because this is going on all the time. But hi, sorry, Prabhu, again, just to quote him, that he asked Prabhupada, can everything be used in Krishna's service? And he says, what about envy? He says, no, envy must be given up. He says, practically everything can be used, but envy must be given up. Okay, it's Ganga Ravinda ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Caitanya Caritamrita ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Grace Prabhupada Prana Prabhu ki jai.